Hey, everyone. So good to see everyone. It sounds like I'm having an echo. Let me just pull out some headphones. And then, so just give me one second. Okay. Uh, it's still. Oh, hmm, okay. Well, let me try something wonderful. Okay. Well, I have an echo. All right. Let's see. Give me 1 second more because it's actually really distracting for me. So everyone just go into like a little meditation for yourself and I'll be right back. Okay. All right. I think that's a lot better for me. Um, awesome. So in any case, yeah. Welcome everyone. Welcome tonight to our community Dharma sharing, or whatever happens in these sharings. And welcome to anyone who's new to the just to the community. And new to this talk, definitely, or this space that we have for Wednesday nights. Welcome. And yeah, tonight I really wanted to do just a little bit of practice around Tara. I'm also, we'll be holding space for any questions at the end. So we're gonna, just work on some compassion, do some chanting. I don't know about you, but today I was watching the inauguration, and I was so shook to my soul, to my very core, by what Michelle Obama was serving. It was, I when the cameras, you know, started showing Michelle Obama, I literally gagged. Like literally, I was like, ah. You know? Um, Whatever she was serving today, we were not ready for it. Um, that burgundy, that blowout, that cinched waist, that buckle. I was like, she is like serving it. She is serving, and we can't even like touch it. I mean, she serves something. We're like, what? What is that? No. That's who I want to be president. But yeah, it's been lots happening, particularly here in the United States. So I know it's easy to get kind of critical about everything. I completely understand that. I abide in that space as well, but I'm also really into being hopeful as well. I've talked a lot about hope. Actually, I've talked a little bit about hope in Love and Rage, but when I was coming up in Buddhist circles, and like no one ever really talked about hope. Hope was actually something that people believed took us out of the present moment, and just kind of propelled us into a future. And I just really disagree with that quite a bit, because for me, hope is such an important tool for me every day, and with the truth of impermanence, the truth of impermanence, why can't we hope? Because impermanence actually says that things are going to be different from moment to moment, day to day. And so I take refuge. Hope is something I take refuge in. And I think in the future, I want to get deeper into that. Um, you can hope for something different. And as you hope, you work as well. I hope to get enlightened, and also I am working to get enlightened. You put both of those together, I think hope in that sense becomes an aspiration for us as well. That we can just say, oh, maybe tomorrow will be different. Maybe next week will be different. Um, Maybe next life will be different. Um, but nothing just happens. Well, very few things happen. Without the work and the effort and the diligence to get anywhere. Um, so anyway, I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling um, good. I'm feeling good about the world. there's still tremendous suffering in the world, absolutely. But this is samsara. There will always be suffering for us. There's always going to be suffering in the human realm, in the human body. And this certainly will never be utopia, right? But it doesn't mean that we don't continue to do, the work of helping each other and helping ourselves. So we'll do some Tara, and Tara is really important. And I've taught on Tara quite a bit, but when we talk about compassion, so why do we give a shit? So why do we give a shit? Why do we care? Right? And particularly when we look at the Bodhisattva, the Buddhist saint tradition, which is what my next book is going to be about. It's the Buddhist saints, or the sainthood, what contemporary sainthood looks like. So I have some words about that. I have some feelings and some words together. And there's going to be an intense situation where I put feelings and words together. But this idea of a contemporary sainthood, why do you care? Why care? We care, because the Bodhisattva realizes the truth of things, at least partially the truth of things, and they realize that people are stuck. They don't have the same realization of truth that they've arrived at. And so there's a way in which we're ethically compelled to move into liberation work for others. Not only that, the Bodhisattva understands that, the Bodhisattva understands what it's like to suffer, that the Bodhisattva has been intimately involved in the suffering, they've moved through their suffering in a way that they understand suffering. They understand all the aspects, all the nuances, the subtleties of suffering, of discomfort. And they know that what is so important is getting help from others, and I think that if we look at our experience, if we look at the times in which we've suffered the most, I think many of us have just wanted help. We've wanted someone to rescue us from that suffering. When some of us have hit rock bottom, and not all of us have hit rock bottom, but when you hit rock bottom, one of the thing that I think, have wanted the most is just for someone to reach down and to grab you. And the Bodhisattva realizes that, and that longing that beings have to be saved from the experiences of deep discomfort and suffering. So that also compels the Bodhisattva into action, the new saint into action, into liberation work. And that is the case for Tara as well, Mother Tara. In Tibetan, her name is Jolma, which means Mother Liberator, or the female liberator. So in my past work, I've just translated it. Jolma is the Mother of Liberation, because that's what I do. I just kind of like claim things, the Mother Liberator, and she liberates us through this expression of spaciousness. It's the blessing of space that Tara and any emanation of the mother offers, is the space. So at our deepest suffering, we're actually experiencing a lot of shutting down, a lot of like contraction around discomfort. And so the liberatory disruption is to interject the memory or the remembrance of spaciousness, that spaciousness is always present. no matter what we're going through. And that's how the mother liberates us, right? And that's how the bodhisattva in general function, is to embody what space looks like as one of the primary tools of liberation work. So much of our compassion, again, it's understanding that a lot of us, a lot of beings, don't experience spaciousness, that they are experiencing contraction, and that's rightfully so, considering that what we feel in our minds often feels really intense or overwhelming, and real. It feels what I sometimes say material, like materialistic. Material meaning real. Is the realness of what arises for us in our minds. And I know I I just feel like all of you are bodhisattvas in some way, and saints. And my work, I'm just saying saints now. You know, but we all are striving to be saints in some way, but we can't embody that sainthood until we get spacious. And we get one of the ways we get spacious is by allowing the mother to come and hold us, to come and tend to us, so that she can actually turn our attention back into the space, so the space can hold everything. And so we're not trying to bypass anything. We're not trying to get rid of anything. This is not the path of bypass, right? This is the path of understanding that everything can be held within this sense of space. I think that's what many of us have been missing these few weeks, this past year, maybe our whole lives. It's this sense of space, this experience of space. At least folks that I talk to, it's just been hard. This past year has just been hard, hard, hard. And so I think that, I just think that the practice of the mother, again, practice of the mother as she is being expressed, as Tara is so important, and also, we also always, now, hopefully for the next 4 years, if we live in the United States, we have a vice president whose name is the mother. So Kamala Devi is an expression of one of the Mahavidyas. Kamala, Devi goddess. Devi means God. We have a goddess as a vice president. Who, isn't it wonderful? I would love to get 5 minutes with the vice president, just to talk about how she grew up with, I don't know, what's her relationship to practice and to the mother. And I wonder if she has she's never talked about her spiritual or religious views either. So I wonder what they are. Anyhow, so yeah, and I think that going back to sainthood, going back to this idea of the bodhisattva, I think that the work of the bodhisattva isn't something that's glamorous. It's not something that's sexy. It's not popular. It's not something that you're necessarily being celebrated for. Now, also recognizing that this week has been Dr. King's birthday. And I actually now that I'm back in Atlanta, I'm back, and, so I'm finally in my house. I have so much space I don't know what to do with. I'm feverishly buying furniture because I don't own furniture. So I'm filling up the house. with things. But anyhow, I live maybe maybe a mile and a half. I would say a mile from where Dr. King grew up, you know. Um, so it's just like literally just like that way, it's like going down the street that way. You run into um, Auburn, which is a historically Black neighborhood. Um, where King, grew up, and that's where Ebenezer churches, New Ebenezer and Ebenezer Church, at the MLK historical site. That's all just like a mile from my house. Where Reverend Warnock pastors, and where Representative John Lewis went to church. All this stuff just connects. All this stuff just connects for me now in a really intense way. But this week being MLK week, it's, I think, for me growing up in Georgia, I grew up in North Georgia, just an hour, 15, 20 minutes from here, not too long from here, not too far from Atlanta. We just grew up intimately with the history and a knowledge of the civil rights movement, of Dr. King's life. And, we kind of understood at an early age the nuances of his life. It wasn't, from when I was growing up, it wasn't a secret that Dr. King had affairs and, and all this stuff, that was really well known. Like, people didn't really keep that a secret. We actually, people, some of the women that he was in relationship with were still quite revered in the community, and still are, in many ways, here in the area. But that kind of bodhisattva work of Dr. King, that's what it looks like, that kind of putting ourselves into the places, the environments where we're needed, regardless of the risk to our lives, and I think another component of the bodhisattva work is the ways in which we are willing, once we get to higher levels of the bodhisattva expression, the ways in which we're willing to offer our bodies into the work. And for me, as someone being a fan, well, not a fan, but a student of great change makers, that's always been like part of my fascination, is the ways in which these great leaders put their bodies on, like they put their bodies where their discourse was. They put their bodies where the discourse was. So they didn't just talk a good game, they actually lived that game. I think about the Panthers. I think about one of my mentors and elders, Erica Huggins, who I have a picture of, but it's still packed up in a box. But maybe I'll show you that in another evening. Erica Huggins was one of the original leaders of the Panthers, and we got close and connected. And one day I'll actually share, we did a talk together a couple of years ago out in Oakland, and she's still out in Oakland, which is an amazing talk, talking about the Panthers, talking about those early days of organizing. And, a lot of the Panthers, people don't know, a lot of the Panthers fell into spiritual practice. Muktananda was one of those people. I know, Karen, you were with Muktananda back in the day. He had a huge community out in Oakland and Berkeley. And so a lot of them fell in with him, but Erica, is, for me, I have a lot of examples in my life, but she's an example of that bodhisattva who was, they just did the work. It was the 60s and the 70s, and they were like, Black people need to be free, right? And this is what I'm going to do to help the community get free. Of course, that was a little bit of the Black Power, work as well, Black empowerment, from Malcolm X, that by any means necessary, and that means that you were willing to give your life for the movement, for the work. And Erica's husband was, was killed by the police, as many were. There's a new movie about Fred Hampton that's out somewhere. I'm not for sure what streaming service. So I'm really interested in seeing that, how they're treating that. But you just didn't know. You didn't know. Sweet Honey in the Rock has a song, and the lyric in the song is, "You just don't." It's paraphrasing it. We just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So it's one of those songs that you sing, knowing that you may be meeting death because of the work that you're doing. I also had a colleague, friend that I did some work with about 2 years ago now. And she did organizing in Syria, and she worked with female women-led and female militias, small militias in Syria. And I think she was Syrian. But she talked about, when she was working with the women, they would celebrate the night before a conflict, or night before they felt like they were going to go into conflict. They would dance and they would celebrate. They would have and share community, and then something would happen the next day, and they would, many of them would be killed, and they always knew that was the risk, always, but they always centered the celebration, the joy of life, even in the midst of struggle and conflict. And she asked me to come. She actually asked me to come to organize with the women. So I think the offer is still on the table. I didn't say yes or no. And sometimes in those moments, I just stay quiet. I'm like, oh, that's an edge. That's an edge for me. Even though in my younger years, I was really trying to get to Palestine. That's a whole nother story. Going to Palestine. I was going to go to Palestine to do aid work, and I ended up going to a monastery instead. It's a long story. And then the monastery got a hold of me. And we know the end of that story. But yeah, it's, again, it's, how do we put our bodies where our discourse is? I think that's something that that's a hard one, for us. Now, we also think about Jesus. We think about the stories around Jesus, the narratives around Jesus, talking about putting your body where the discourse is, right? And when I think about Jesus, I think about Jesus as an expression of the Bodhisattva, because he had a different relationship with his body. And I think advanced Bodhisattvas have a very different relationship to body, as well, to the physicality of self. I think as one sees the illusion of the world, one begins to see the illusion of the body. Actually, the practice begins with tuning into the illusionary expression of self and mind. Our body and mind, right? And then once you have that kind of awareness, that experience, then you begin to sense that illusionary quality in the world around you. So many of our practices, particularly, in tantric practices, in terms of like pranayama, and some of the yogic, and when I say yogic, I also mean like visualization and chanting and, ritual and ceremony. Like, so much of that work, that practice, is really about understanding the body as an illusion. We have in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, there's a system, practices called the yogas, the 6 yogas, and there's different kinds of 6 yogas as well. But the 6 yogas are not, they're not all physical exercises. Some of them are, but the yogas are, also visualization and breath, right? And it's about touching, tuning into, cutting into the illusion of the body. It begins with the body, it begins with the breath, it begins with the mind. Pranayama it's for me, it's been really important. In my practice, just the breath, pranayama, life force breath, the breath of life. Prana is, life force energy, chi, lung, we would say in Tibetan. That rides the breath. The life force energy rides with anything that flows, anything that's fluid. Breath, blood, talking about the body, breath, blood, fluids in the body, right? That's why the breath practice is so important, because we're working to have agency, to develop agency over our life force, in the body. But yeah, so the Bodhisattva's relationships with body is evolved. It's awakened. We would say, and so as we move through these times right now, I think it's so important that we shift this intention back into our experience, back into body, back into mind, right? Back into the home of the self. You can't be in the world until you learn to be at home in your experience. The world is just an expression of your experience. Like we used to say back in the days, of my training, we would say that the world is just an expression of our karma, or, we would also say that no one existed except for our karma. So when we, this people were just an expression of our karma, which is really just quite a profound statement. But we, when you go through training like that, all you do is sit around and make profound statements because it sounds good. It's like tweeting. It's like, I'm going to get a hot take today, and people are always doing hot takes with me on social media. Well, Lama Rod, blah, 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 yada, yada. That sounds pretty, and I'm sure that will look wonderful on a shirt, but all you did was say something, like all you did was say something that sounded really witty and profound, but are you living that? You're living that, and of course that brings me back to the pathos, because a lot of things bring me back to the pathos. But again, well, it's not just the pathos, but it was, it was these intense groups, have been working throughout history, absolutely, but, when I think about the 60s, 70s, for instance, a lot of these really extremist groups, and I don't say extreme, I don't mean extremism as a negative. I mean, it's like you go to the edge, and you're doing something that people aren't doing, but, you go back to those kinds of groups, and people were, people just weren't talking, again, they weren't talking a really pretty, beautiful, amazing game. They were living that. They were like living that, and you don't, a lot of the work that we read, it wasn't work that was happening in the moment. Like people weren't like doing the organizing and coming home and writing necessarily. Some were, but not necessarily, the people looked back on their experience and started writing and started putting things out. So in the moment, people weren't sitting around. Yeah, I mean, yes, people were sitting around partially to exchange ideas, to have the, that, as we would say in the Catholic worker movement, the clarification of thoughts. Clarification of thought is when, in the Catholic workers, what we would do, well, traditionally in the worker movement, in that, kind of communist socialist language, the proletariats, and the scholars would get together and have this clarification of thought, where which is basically sharing and debates, in this container. And that was seen as a central part of how theory was worked out in the movement. But I think this happens in all movement spaces. I think definitely it's happening a lot in Black Lives Matter movement spaces as well. And of course I'm a part of that discourse, as well. But to sit together and to share these ideas, to have this clarification, to have a sharpening of what we believe in, to have a challenge to what we believe, because it wasn't about calling people out. It wasn't about getting hot takes in. It was about helping people to develop a more intense revolutionary wisdom, if I may use the language from that era, the revolutionary wisdom, revolutionary clarity about how things were going down, about how things were happening, and that deepened the work. When the thought was clarified, when there was a revolutionary clarity, the work deepened, the work got specific, it got efficient, it got effective. You just weren't out on the street just doing whatever you wanted. You were working in a coordinated way, being held by a specific theory that you and your community work together to clarify, to build. Sometimes we call that model teach-ins now as well. And those, of course, those are models that I come out of in my earlier years of activism, but that clarification of thought just gets you real clear about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I use writing to do that for myself. I use, the books that I write, and dialogues with folks to deepen this clarity of thought, this revolutionary clarity about what it is that I'm supposed to do, or what it is I'm thinking, or what it is my goal is, my purpose is. And then once I have that really clear, I'm able to put my body into that clarity, that discourse. So when you put your body there, which is just another way of saying I begin to embody, I begin to deeply internalize this revolutionary wisdom, and I begin to live it. And revolutionary wisdom isn't, it's something that it's full of contradictions as well. The Panthers were full of contradictions. The Panthers were full of misogyny, there was all kinds of stuff happening. Of course, the things have been told to me, that I don't really share. I can't really share about the party, but there are other things that are really well documented, that are just like, okay, that seems like a contradiction. You're talking about revolutionary freedom and liberation, and you have these like antiquated ideas about gender and hierarchy at the same time. So, and then you have certain relationships to money, materialism, and to notoriety that was happening as well. But the work was still important, and the work still changed, many people's lives at the same time. And I think a bodhisattva is full of contradictions. Dr. King was full of contradictions. Malcolm X is full of contradictions. Whomever our people are. Audre Lorde, I had met and had this conversation with a student of Audre Lorde. And, just like the stuff that that I was told, about Audre Lorde, it's like, oh, Audre Lorde was a human, you know, who had contradictions, who wrote this beautiful, transformative, liberatory work, and then she also had these human qualities that people struggled to reconcile. Um, and that's it. We have to stop expecting everyone to be perfect, which is what the young sister today was talking about in her poem, Amanda Gorman, who I thought she was like 15. I don't know why I thought that, but she's like 22. She's 22. I was just like, oh, this is so beautiful, getting like a young person to be the poet laureate. And I know people were having a fit um, online about it because they're like, well, there are other poets and people who've been writing longer who deserve it. I mean, it's not my debate, but in her poem, she talked about, you know, this being an unfinished nation, and this is not about perfection. At least I think that's what she said. I have misinterpretations often, um, but I think that was the gist. So it's not about this perfection. Perfection is like this really capitalistic white supremacist, like modern industrial, kind of thing that just perpetuates, suffering, hierarchy, class division. Um, what is perfection? I think we get rid of this pursuit of perfection and we start living authentically with our contradictions. And I'm not saying either that like we should be okay with the contradictions and that if we have contradictions, we shouldn't work anymore. But I'm not really saying that. I'm just saying that you won't be able to clean up everything into a nice, neat presentation. And we just need to be aware of where the edges are, where the tattered edges are. It's like when you go, like sometimes you buy like some type of clothing and pants, and it's unhemmed, because you go and buy them and you take them to a tailor, maybe to get hemmed. That's just like what it is, It's just like we have to leave some part of ourselves unhemmed because that unhemmed part of ourselves allows us to keep growing out, keep expanding. If we get all hemmed up, how do you grow? You know, how do you keep growing? When I was young, I would get pants, and as I got older and taller, people would, well, my mom, we would get the hems let out, more and more as I got taller, and that's really how, that's the alternative of what we can do, actually is to live in a way in which we're able to continue to expand to let out that hem. Like, we may all get all hemmed up and say, well, this is who I am. This is what I believe, all the stuff that we do to proclaim a sense of self. But we have to be willing to grow from that, to expand, to let out the hem and say, and I'm grown. So let me just cut this hem, and maybe I'll just resew something, right? This is who I am now. But again, at no point do you say, this is where I'm staying. This is where I'm staying. I was working with an 81-year-old recently who was just like still moving on. She was just like, no matter how many years I have left on the earth, I'm still practicing, I'm still growing, I'm still trying to do as much as I can to evolve. Like I'm not gonna stay, I'm just not gonna settle for things, and I found that to be deeply inspiring. No matter how old, it's like the work just continues. Over and over, the hymns continue to be let out over and over and over again. So, there's also a call to be messy. There's also a call to be unkept and to let go of how the world is um, judging us in that way. You know, as I get older, I find that I'm just gonna be wherever I need to be. I over these past 20 years, I've people have criticized me, in many different ways, right? It's like, why are you doing this? Even just close friends, but it comes from a place of love with friends, But people are like, oh, Rod, why are you doing this? Why are you making this decision? Why are you moving here? Why are you going to the monastery? Why are you going to do this program? Why are you going to this country? So forth and so on. But you get to this point where you have to understand it's not about other people in that way. And I think about the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva has to free themselves before they free other people. There's no liberation if if the one who's trying to free you is themselves bound. You know, it makes me think of like Redemption Song. Mental slavery. Like if I am enslaved within the conceptual mind, how am I going to offer you a sense of liberation? You know, and I know people who are trying to do that. They're still bound by concept. They're still bound by materialism. They're trying to do this liberation work. If you're still bound, then what you're going to do is reproduce violence for people. You're going to reproduce a model to get people deeper and even more stuck in the material world, in the conceptual mind. Um, there's a lot of folks out there doing that. One, because it's, you know, they feel like that's the only way they're validating their scene is by doing this kind of work, but they haven't done the work for themselves. I know people, colleagues and so forth, in this, what do I call it? The spiritual industrial complex, the spiritual self-help industrial complex. And they're I think they're good people. I don't think they're like evil, but I do think they should practice more before they start selling liberation. um I think that happens partially because you don't have anyone telling you that you need to go further. Like you're not in a relationship to teachers and mentors and elders and guides or a community that's actually reflecting back to you the work. You're just independent, out in the world, and you're like, oh, I've arrived, right? People like me. I'm beautiful. I have beautiful Instagram and social media stuff, and I have this deal and that book deal, so I must be effective, or I must be important. I must be doing good work, and it's not, that doesn't always line up, you know, with the reality of you doing good work. It lines up often with your ability to look good and to sell, to sell prettiness, to sell beauty, to sell something that makes people feel good. Authentic liberation work isn't about people feeling good. It's about people doing really hard work to get free. That doesn't sell well. Actual liberatory work, and support doesn't really sell well at all. So people just do what's easier. As Tyra Banks says, sometimes we just go and rest on pretty. People just rest on pretty and they sell pretty, but pretty doesn't last. What lasts? What lasts is the work. The work lasts, but pretty fades. Pretty goes away. So let's do a little bit of practice I did really, really, really want to do a longer Matara practice, but we'll definitely do just a shorter Tara practice tonight. So just go ahead and find yourself in a position that feels appropriate for you. Let's turn our attention now to just our intentions for our practice. Why are we practicing? Who are we practicing for? And if your breath is accessible, I encourage you to turn your attention to your breath, noticing the in breath and the out breath. Allowing the breath to elongate, to deepen. Shifting our attention down to our heart centers. Breathing in and out of the heart center. We begin to move into our gratitude practice or our devotion practice. So, with our gratitude practice, just reflecting on something that we're grateful for, or just reflecting on the ways in which we are the recipients of kindness and labor from so many beings around us. And for our devotion practice, reflecting on the kindness of our lineages or the kindness of our teachers, guides, mentors, elders. Turning our minds into these expressions of gratitude, and allowing that energy to awaken within the heart center. allowing the energy of gratitude to begin to circulate throughout the body, allowing this energy of gratitude to even begin to circulate through the mind. And in the space around you, I invite you to begin to invite your benefactors to come and sit with you. All your teachers and guides and elders, your communities, and any ancestors that feel benevolence to you. Inviting any deities and other spirits, energies that love you, that are protecting you. And slowly they begin to radiate the energy of care around you. This energy of care begins to fill the space around you, and slowly it begins to sink into your body, filling your body, filling your mind with this profound energy of care. And slowly begin to imagine that this energy of care begins to concentrate in the heart center. And they get so intense that the heart center begins to glow with this warm, soft light. Imagining that within the heart center, that the mother begins to form. The mother in whatever way feels appropriate for you. You can imagine Tara beginning to form in the heart center, or any expression of the mother that feels appropriate. And so, going a step further with kind of something maybe you've never done before. So, I'm inviting you to return back to the breath, breathing in and out of the heart center. And as you breathe in, as you inhale into the heart center, imagining that you're inhaling into the mother. And that in breath is an offering. It feeds her, it intensifies her deep radiance, her compassion, her healing energy for us. And as you exhale, I want you to imagine that the exhale is just the mother releasing that energy in your body, this energy of compassion, care, and healing in your body. So this is called an internal exhale. So pranayama, it's an internal exhale. So breathing into the mother, imagining exhaling into the body, but that exhale is the mother just exploding or spreading this energy of care, healing, compassion throughout the body. So as a visualization, we can imagine breathing into the mother begins to glow. And as you exhale, imagine that exhale is just the mother radiating through waves and impulses, this energy of care and healing throughout the body and the mind. And just connecting to this experience of how through the out breath, the exhale, the mother radiates, sends energy through the body. As we continue to move through that, we'll just do a brief round of the mantra. Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. I'm sorry we don't have the mantra up, but you can just sit and listen or chant along if you know the mantra. Os Om Tare Tu Tare Ture So 소아음 자레주 자레주레 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 소아. So turning our attention back to the mother in our heart center. In our practice and in our minds, just thanking her for her love, her guidance, praying to her that she remains in our hearts, holding us and tending to us until we reach enlightenment. And she dissolves into the white light of our hearts, and she remains in our hearts, in our bodies, in our minds. We turn our attention outward to our benefactors. We thank them for their love, their guidance. And we ask them to return back to where they came from to be with us. Means returning our attention back into the space, and just beginning to reawaken the body, moving through some simple movements and stretches, whatever feels appropriate. All right, everyone. Thank you for your practice. Okay. And are there any questions that I can help anyone with tonight? This is a really good practice to do, just like a really basic, connecting to the mother and our heart centers, feeling the mother's presence. I think is really helpful right now. The sharing significance of touching the drum to my head. Yeah. It's when you're working with a ritual instruments, any ritual object, stones, whatever it may be, instruments. So these objects have a consciousness. So through ritual use, objects develop an energetic consciousness that you begin to take care of. And that I touch the drum as a way to respect the drum, and also it's to respect. I mean, in Tibetan culture, when I was coming up, so in Tibetan culture, when I was training, we would bump heads. So I would bump heads with my teacher. So we would just bump our foreheads together, and that was our greeting, which I loved, which of course no one does outside of Tibetan culture. And so that's also a part of like that touching my forehead to something is a sign of respect, and honor and reverence. And also, like, it's a transference of energy between myself and an object. But these things, develop consciousness. Crystals, like for those of you who work with crystals are conscious. And the more you work with crystals, the more you start communicating. You communicate with crystals, and you just begin to see them as just expressions. They're just sentient beings, so you just respect sentient beings, as much as you can. So that's it. That's why I do that. Let's see. The eternal exhale was powerful for me. I can feel it. It is really embodied wave. Would you recommend more of a physical movement release practice after this, or more of a restful integration practice with our bodies? You know what? That depends. It just depends on how you're feeling. Really, some people need to move through some embodied asana movement work, or sometimes, it's like you just go straight to bed. You're like, I'm done. So it's always different. If you have a lot of energy, so if you're feeling a lot of energy that's hard to contain, movement. is really what's helpful. Even just taking a walk, doing some pacing, something like that, that would be really useful. But if you're just feeling like settled and grounded, then you just rest, you know. So this is great. This is we just listen. This is part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to listen to our bodies. Um, your body, there's a, and of course the body is intuitive, of course, but the world, the phenomenal world in general is quite intuitive. You start listening, and the world is trying to tell you how to get free. Our bodies are trying to tell us how to get free. The world is trying to tell you to get free, how to get free. I mean, it's the matter of listening, and just being guided by the data that you're getting from the phenomenal world. And that's a teaching in Vajrayana around the guru, the four manifestations of the guru. Um, So the guru is more than just this physical person. The guru is teaching us through the phenomenal world. The guru is teaching us through text and dharma and so forth and so on. The different ways in which the world is trying to teach us how to practice. Anyway, this is just like intuitive, somatic experience stuff. That we're really talking about. Using the body, seeing the body as this intuitive wisdom that we can learn to tune into. Um, yeah, that was one of the things I miss about, my teachers, that it was that embrace, that coming together of foreheads. It's I actually haven't thought about this in years, frankly, to haven't really been in Tibetan communities for years, but it's really intimate, the touching of the forehead. Because the forehead, so body, so the forehead represents the body. Of course, the throat is speech, and the heart sort of represents the mind. So the head isn't the mind in Tibetan culture, but it just represents just your body. So it's like you're offering your body to someone when you're touching your forehead. There's lots in my training with Tibetans that's really beautiful, that makes sense. And there's some other things that just don't make sense. And I'm just like, I don't get it, so I'm not going to do it. I was very, very hard headed in the lineage. I was like, I just don't get this. It was full of people. It was full of a lot of folks, but white people. It was full of white people, just like trying to emulate Tibetan culture. And then I would show up and just ask, why? Like, why are we doing? Like, was this just like, call and response, like that kind of like, you know, we just see someone do it and we do it. We just kind of assimilate it without a critical awareness of what we're assimilating. So anyway, that's why I'm a troublemaker, to ask why. But the things that were explained to me, and I would say, oh, that makes sense. I can do that, but there are things that were explained to me and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So I won't do it. And that's all it was. But that was seen as problematic for me. I was seeing my teacher would say that I create trouble. He was right. He was right. I do create trouble. Well, as John Lewis would say, good trouble. Representative John Lewis. Um, so, let me see what else. So I think that's it. If you don't have anything else. Um, hmm. This is why I'm just really interested in creating. Well, when I met the Karmapa for the first time, um, he came into my 3-year retreat. This is the first 3-year retreat he'd ever been in, outside of, well, Tibet or India, I guess. The first Western retreat. So it was my retreat. It was 2000 something something. And so when a high lama comes to visit, there's a protocol, there's an etiquette, which of course I would question. And part of the protocol was to create certain offerings, particularly certain kinds of foods. They're just really traditional. Um, and we would make it and we would serve it. And I would just start asking, like, if I came to a different country to look at, the Karmapa, I know some of you don't know this, the Karmapa is the leader of Justin and I's school of Buddhism, the Kagyu. So he's the head of the Kagyu school. He's AWOL right now. And, I say that because he is AWOL. Who knows where he is? No one knows. He's like on no, he's not on an island somewhere. He may be in New York. He may be on an island. Um, in any case, he's the leader of our school. He's younger than me. He's like in his mid-30s by now. But so when he came, I was like, well, why do we have to do, like, if I were the leader of a school and I went to another country to see how, like, my school is doing, my tradition, I would love for the people of that land to offer me something that's more authentic to their country, not offering me something from my culture, which is just a poor reproduction, since we're not really Tibetan, you know. So, I would be like, why can't we just think about the offerings that are really significant for us in our lives? And of course, that was not taken seriously by the lineage. Um, I am not in general taken serious by the lineage, but I mean, I think that's fine. He may still be, I think I have no idea. I have no idea. So anyhow, thank you everyone for your practice, and I don't want to keep you any longer. And you know the schedule for the week, so I will update you on the status of the Sunday services. I'm really having to take the month off to really cut down on a lot of teaching, but I'll let you know what we're working on. So anyway, thank you everyone. Please be well. Please take care of yourself. Please continue to practice. Whenever you get down and out and overwhelmed, just think about Michelle Obama today. That's what's getting me through the day. Just thinking about Michelle Obama. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll see you all soon in another venue.